May these books on ancestral wisdom guide your steps. I've also included a passage reading from one of their chapters to spark your own quest of remembrance and discovery.
Ancestor veneration around the world. Mexico and Mesoamerica. In Mexico and in many Mexican communities in the United States, Día de los Muertos is observed for 3 days, beginning on the evening of October 31st and continuing through November 2nd. This is the Day of the Dead celebration, a time when families gather together, pack picnic lunches, and go to cemeteries to honor the memories of family members who have died in the past year, with special attention paid to children and infants. On the first day, altars, or ofrendas, include colored tissue ribbons, flowers, photos of the dead, and candles. It's also popular to include food offerings with a theme of death. Sugar skulls and coffins are a common item, as are small figures made of bread. In some of the Yucatan Peninsula's smaller villages in the state of Campeche, the Day of the Dead is called 𝒂𝓗𝓗, a Yucatan phrase that means feeding of the souls. Photographer George Ferry has spent years in Campeche, respectfully, creating images that show how residents keep the bones of their ancestors in wooden crates which are then stored in colorfully painted concrete mausoleums. Ferry describes the way each box is lined with a cloth embroidered by a family member that depicts the person's image, name, and a short memorial text. When visiting tombs at 𝒂𝓗𝓗, family members gently remove the bones from the box, and clean them with a soft brush while praying and speaking words of praise to the deceased. After the bones are cleaned, they're covered in a fresh cloth and returned until next year's celebration. In the Zinacantec Mayan culture of Mesoamerica, ancestral guardians formed the cornerstone of shamanistic practice. Author Robert M. Torrance explains in The Spiritual Quest, Transcendence in Myth, Religion, and Science that a shaman might venture on a quest, often with as many as 19 different steps to be taken, each involving prayers, candles, and sacrifices. Making the pilgrimage. From his village to the ceremonial center down the mountainside, the shaman would stop at a series of shrines to offer prayers to his ancestor gods for healing, enlightenment, and more. Among the Inca, deceased members of the royal family were mummified and served burnt offerings and drinks. They were also watched over by a living guardian, whose job it was to ensure the deceased had everything they needed in the afterlife. In return, they were consulted for their opinions on matters of state. An extension of the idea of the Inca king's divine rulership. In much of the Andes, ancestor worship extended beyond royal family members to include all social classes. A 16th-century Quechua nobleman, Felipe Huaman Poma de Ayala, spent much of his life chronicling the impact Spanish conquistadores had upon the people of the Andes. He wrote that after someone died, members of the extended family washed and cared for the body, providing the deceased with the reverence appropriate to their station in society. The body might be kept in a tomb, but could also reside in a relative's home shrine, where they would be honored regularly with prayer and sacrifices. This typically took place only with lineal descendants and usually only through a few generations, but it was believed that treatment of ancestral spirits had a direct effect on one's fortune and health. Disrespect or negligence would result in financial ruin and physical ailments. You can use these practices and customs as inspiration for your own ancestor veneration if your badass kinfolk come from Mexico or Central America. If your loved ones are buried nearby, make a day of it to stop at the cemetery to clean their headstones and leave a small token or offering in tribute. Honoring Your Ancestors by Mallorie. Blood ancestors. This is what most people think of when they hear the word ancestors. This group includes your parents' parents, your parents' parents' parents, and so on and so forth, all the way back to mitochondrial Eve. We all have a special relationship with our blood ancestors because they created our bodies with their bodies. And because the body is the foundation for all other work in this lifetime, both in ancestor veneration and other pursuits, I encourage my students to honor this group first. Everything that you want to do you will find easier if your body is in good health. But what does it mean to honor one group of ancestors first? That will vary from person to person. In Oka, also called Santeria or Lukumi, we honor 𝒂𝓐𝓐, a combination of blood and lineage ancestors, explained below, before any religious ceremony, we give them offerings and ask for their blessing through divination before proceeding. You might honor your blood ancestors first by giving them offerings before doing other types of spiritual work, such as reading tarot or casting a spell. Or you might honor them first by praying to them first thing in the morning, after you wake up. Ultimately, honoring them first simply means acknowledging that this is the first group of people you made a spiritual pact with, that pact being your decision to be born into their line. All other partnerships, initiations, and affiliations came after and were rooted in this pact. A strong relationship with your blood ancestors will also serve as your first line of defense against hostile spirits. Once you have entered into good relationship with your blood ancestors, you can call on them for help when an unwelcome spirit has entered your home or started following you around. This is usually a lot simpler and more effective than complicated banishing rituals. You may find that as you go deeper into your ancestor veneration practice, you begin to gravitate more toward a group of ancestors that isn't your blood ancestors. Maybe you will feel more connected to your spouse's ancestors. Maybe you will focus more of your ancestor veneration practice on your guides described below. Or perhaps you will feel naturally drawn toward ancestors that you have a particular affinity with, such as a shared vocation. That's entirely normal. But it's still important that we never forget the blood ancestors, because they have much to teach us. The blood ancestors preside over a particular set of mysteries relating to the origin and ultimate destination of life on Earth. The process of our evolution as a species plays out in the development of the human embryo. It starts with a single cell in an ocean of amniotic fluid, just as life on Earth began with a single-celled organism in the ocean. As the cell divides and multiplies, it takes forms with increasing complexity, resembling species that evolved earlier than we did. This is why most animal embryos look the same during the early stages in their development. As we consider the mysteries of our blood ancestors, it's important to remember that the human body hasn't fundamentally changed since we left Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. Thus, all forms of bodywork, including yoga, breathwork, and massage, can be incorporated into your practice with your blood ancestors. You may invoke them before engaging in these endeavors, or you may find that these modalities help you to communicate with them. Often, messages from our ancestors come in the form of bodily sensations. You'll learn more about the body's capacity for mediumship in later chapters. Recently deceased relatives in dreams and visions. The blood ancestors may appear as individuals or as a collective. The recently deceased may appear in a form that resembles what they were like in life. In my experience, the recently deceased can be some of the most difficult ancestors to work with. Death is a profound and challenging process. In many cultures, it is believed that the dead must travel over a bridge to return to the spirit world to be renewed. In southern Italy and Sicily, this bridge is called the Ponte di San Giacomo, and it is said to be covered in knives, needles, and thorns. This belief is reflected in the Catholic doctrine of purgatory, where the recently deceased are purified before they can be reunited with God. It can be helpful to pray for these ancestors so that their passage to the afterlife is quicker and less painful. Offerings of cool water, light, and soft white cloth can also help. Lineage ancestors. Some ancestors aren't a part of our direct bloodline back to mitochondrial Eve, but they feel so close to us that they might as well be. These are lineage ancestors. Often, lineage ancestors are formally adopted through signing binding papers or rituals which resemble a rebirth. They can include the blood ancestors of adoptive parents, the ancestral in-laws who adopt us through marriage, or ancestors who are acquired when we are formally adopted into an initiatory lineage. In my experience, lineage ancestors tend to behave like blood ancestors, in that they expect to receive special honors. Chapter 5. Praying to and for your ancestors. If you feel weird about prayer, now is the time to face that feeling. If you've never prayed before, now is the time to start. Prayer is simple, powerful, and beautiful. It is intimately linked to mysticism and in some ways indistinguishable from mediumship. Saint Catherine of Siena was said to frequently interrupt whatever she was doing or saying to consult with God. This consisted of her falling into an ecstatic trance where she would pray aloud in spontaneous poetry. Catholic or not, we can all stand to follow her example by interrupting the monotony of our own lives and the constant chatter of what Buddhists call the monkey mind to speak directly to the divine or the spirit world. When I was younger, I sought spells, I bought so many books, full of them. Obtain these ingredients, buy these tools, say these words, and the spell is done. That was the promise these books made. But in spite of myself, I actually did very little magic. Something about that format, the ritual that begins with a purchase and ends abruptly with closing the circle, didn't work for me. On the other hand, prayer is free and never stops. Pray without ceasing, the Bible says, and it's one of the few lines I listen to. From your first breath to your last, every word spoken or sung is part of one long prayer. Make it count. Prayer is an offering, but it is something more. Prayer is healing. We may pray to the ancestors or for the ancestors. We might even pray with the ancestors. How to pray? Maybe one of your relatives already taught you how to pray. If so, please skip to the next section. If not, consider these guidelines. Before you pray, take a moment to clear your head using whatever method you prefer. I have a friend who chants Om 3 times, then the 4 elements, earth, air, water, fire, before praying. You can even meditate just for a few minutes. There are several mobile phone apps that can guide you through this process, if you're not sure. If yours is a Christian-adjacent tradition, you can dip your fingers in holy water and make the sign of the cross over your body. When we pray, we may speak aloud. Some concentrate on the words, because they are what we notice when others pray. But, the words are merely an external reflection of a process happening within the person praying. You must pay attention to your internal state, which is how we learn to enter and leave trance. Trance is a state of consciousness in which we are able to perceive things we cannot normally perceive. That may sound scary, especially if you were taught that altered states of consciousness are always a negative thing brought on by consuming illicit substances. Our culture teaches us that being in control is a virtue, so anything that might lessen our ability to control ourselves and our environments must be bad. In reality, we slip in and out of trance states all the time, often. When we are performing repetitive tasks, washing dishes, driving down a highway, running on a treadmill, and so on. Mild trance can feel like being relaxed, more intense trance can feel a bit disorienting as the ego, or sense of self, lets go. Because we do this naturally, it can be hard to catch it when it happens. External cues like spoken prayers are helpful reminders to pay attention to how our conscious awareness is shifting in the moment. Sensuality plays a huge role in trance and can be incorporated into your prayer life. Even asceticism, the lack of sensual stimulus, is a sensual state. If you are praying within the comfort of your own home, put on some music. Light some incense or a scented candle. This can be presented as an offering or for your own enjoyment, just make sure that your motivation is clear. Close your eyes. Or better yet, look at something, maybe an image of the divine or a photograph of one of your ancestors. You can let your eyes relax into a soft focus on any one feature of the space surrounding you. Or, alternatively, you can focus on some specific detail during each line of your prayer, and allow that experiential cut-up to inspire new meaning. Stay aware of your body. Often, spirits speak to us through the medium of our bodies. What are they saying through you? Some prayers mention specific choreography. If you are reading a prayer that includes the line "I come before you kneeling," then you should be kneeling when you say that prayer. You can also add your own choreography to the prayer. How does it feel to pray with your hands palm to palm versus with your fingers interlaced? What happens in your heart when you bow your head? If at any point you feel dissociated during your prayer, make a meaningful gesture. Don't worry about fitting your body into a specific mold, allow yourself to be ugly or without poise. It's better to be ugly and honest than composed and feel nothing. Repetitive prayers can be a useful form of trance. Induction. Funny things happen when your body is absorbed in a repetitive task directed by muscle memory rather than conscious thought. You may find yourself having visions or receiving messages while deep in prayer. This is normal, but not necessary. If you have Catholic ancestors, I highly recommend learning to pray the Rosary. Learn the standard prayers on a standard set of beads, first. But then, it is entirely traditional to switch up the prayers, the number of beads, the medals on the end of the Rosary. I've seen witches make rosaries with bones and hagstones. Some devotees of the Madonna replace all mentions of the Father God with a Mother Goddess. Have fun with it.
Mini Review, by Snow Owl Crystals. The book you just heard, Honoring Your Ancestors, A Guide to Ancestral Veneration by Mallorie Vaudoise, wasn't really to my personal taste, but I included it because it fits today's theme on ancestral reverence. My critique is that the book is written primarily from a Catholic and Abrahamic perspective, which is absolutely fine in itself. However, there are moments where the author's tone feels dismissive toward paganism and witchcraft. While that may reflect her own faith and worldview, I feel the book would have been stronger if it had been presented specifically for a Catholic audience rather than trying to appear spiritually inclusive. Many sections focus on ancestral veneration through Catholic prayers and rituals while subtly discouraging pagan practices, which makes it clear who the book is truly for. I wouldn't recommend this book if you're a devoted pagan, witch, or someone deeply involved in the occult. If you don't mind subtle dismissive tones toward pagan traditions or the occasional condescending remark about witchcraft and magic, you might still find it tolerable. To the author, I'd gently suggest that next time, a book written specifically for a Catholic audience would likely come across more authentic and less dismissive of other paths. Just my 2 cents.
Designing your ancestor altar. The most important thing to decide when designing your ancestor altar is whether you want all of your blood ancestors to be together or not. While I currently have both my maternal and my paternal ancestors on the same altar, for a long time I worked with just my paternal ancestors. Each family is unique. Just because you have DNA from both maternal and paternal lines, that doesn't mean you need to include them in your altar space, or in your practice. You can have as few or as many altars as you see fit. The altar furniture. Deciding what furniture to use for your altar comes down to personal preference and what is accessible to you. Heirloom furniture. Heirlooms are covered in more depth in Chapter 7, but you may want to consider using an inherited piece for your altar. Existing furniture. You don't need to run out and buy a bunch of new things for your altar. The top of a nightstand or bookshelf can work perfectly. Storage. Small shelves like spice racks and other petite storage compartments are a wonderful addition to your altar for housing things like graveyard dirt, decorations, and offerings. Note, if you practice a specific spiritual tradition that has its own rules about ancestor veneration and ancestor altars, I recommend following those guidelines. Decorations and offerings. What is the difference between a decoration and an offering? Decorations are permanent, or long-term, items on your altar that act as continuous anchor points for a spirit. Popular decorations for ancestor altars are things like photographs, heirlooms and keepsakes, Chapter 7, figurines, maps, flags, plants, cremains, and graveyard dirt. I will be teaching you how I collect graveyard dirt later in this chapter, as well as going over some of the objects I have on my altar. The beauty of decorations is that they are completely unique to you and your family, and you can make your altar look however you'd like it to. Offerings are temporary. They are something you gift to your ancestors. Though they may only last from a few moments to a few days, the emotional and spiritual effects of offerings are enduring and help establish a relationship between you and your ancestors. Offerings fall into 3 categories: time, words, and things. Time as an offering is the practice of showing up for your ancestors. Setting aside a portion of your day to perform a ritual or work with your ancestors is the most important offering you can give. It shows that you are dedicated to them. Words as an offering are the process of speaking to your ancestors. Divination and other forms of spirit communication fall into this category. Getting to know your ancestors' needs and boundaries, as well as sharing your own, will be beneficial to your relationship. Things are the physical items you give to your ancestors. Think water, coffee, food, trinkets, flowers, and other such gifts. Though they differ only slightly, both decorations and offerings are important components of your ancestor altar used to honor the spirits.
Mini review by 𝒂𝓈𝓉𝓇𝒶. Claire Goodchild is an award-winning artist and author known for her beautiful work in tarot and astrology. Her company, Black and the Moon, has been featured in Flare magazine and many other publications. I'm a big fan of her artistry and writing. Her tarot and oracle decks, as well as her books, are all crafted with clarity, insight, and deep respect for the craft. I absolutely love her work and would highly recommend anything she creates.
Who and what are the mighty dead? Why are they important? And how do you commune with them? All of these questions are explored in detail, but each is a mystery. As you go, you will find your own answers to these 3 questions, as my answers will not necessarily be your answers. The simplest understanding of the mighty dead is that they are the sanctified dead. They are the holy dead. While modern pagans live in a world where we see everything as holy, as everything has an indwelling spirit or spark of divinity, when we call these spirits sanctified, we are setting them apart from what we would commonly think of as the dead. They have reached some state of holiness differentiated from their peers. Every religious practice has some tradition recognizing this category of spirit, though the terms might not be clear or explicit. Every religion has those souls who have, to some extent, succeeded in the given goals of the path. They become examples, guides and teachers to others on the path, separating them from those who simply died without this level of success or wisdom. Heroes and demigods in the pagan traditions, these sanctified dead are harder to see. One can claim the demigods are like the bodhisattvas, saints, and masters, and in many ways they are. To the average storybook reader, the heroes of Greek myth are different in origin than the heroes of the occultist. In the interpretations of the Greek philosophers, such as Thomas Taylor's Notes on the Description of Greece, by Pausanias, Volume 1-3, based upon the philosophies of Pythagoras and Plato, there are 3 orders of souls who perpetually attend the gods, angels, demons, and heroes. While the angel is the intermediary spirit between the gods and the worlds, the demon is the intermediary connection between a human's conscious self and the higher worlds. Some consider the demon the familiar spirit or guide, while others see it as a personification of the higher self. Heroes are those souls incarnated in human form that turned from contemplation of the temporal to the eternal and then dedicated themselves to serve the gods. Heroes move towards certain gods, certain archetypal qualities, and in so doing, are identified with a particular deity, giving rise to the idea that the figure was a demigod, literal son or daughter of a particular divinity. We are all the children of the gods, and all have the opportunity to become demigods on the path of evolution. Because of this, many who are uninitiated mistake the heroes for incarnated gods, but the heroes simply act as the worldly agents or vassals of the gods to whom they are most attuned. One need only look at the story of Hercules, demigod son of Zeus, with esoteric eyes to see a coded story of initiation through the 12 labors of the zodiac, generating his seemingly superhuman abilities and ending with his flaming, poisoned body consumed and the light of his divinity revealed. He ascended to Olympus to live alongside the gods. The heroes are said to be served, not by the common familiar spirit, but by an elevated or exalted essential demon that most of humanity cannot experience, since they cannot turn from the senses and the temporal view of the world to experience the eternal. We can see another view of the sanctified dead in the Norse Einherjar. Their name means lone fighters, and they are the souls of men chosen by the Valkyries for their valor and bravery in battle. Half of the dead are chosen go to Valhalla in Asgard for Odin, and the other half go to Freyja's hall, Sessrumnir, in her sacred field Folkvangr. I think it's important to think of the Einherjar, demigods, and heroes as sanctified dead. In our modern metaphysical spirituality, we envision those reaching enlightenment and sanctification as entirely peaceful, pacifist and vegetarian, but the cultural factors of spiritual virtue contribute to the process, as each virtue is particular to the time and place. It's interesting to think of sword and axe-wielding warriors and heroes, venerated for their bravery and battle prowess, reaching a condition similar to the compassionate bodhisattva or loving saint. Likewise, the priest-kings of many traditions, most notably the ancient tradition of the Egyptians, where the religious leader is also expected to be a warrior and strategist. Egyptian occultist and ceremonial magician Florence Farr speaks to this concept in her work that would later become the book Egyptian Magic. Mild saintliness was by no means the ideal of the Egyptian priesthood. Intense practical interest in the life of their country, and the ennobling of natural functions, drew a sharp contrast between them and the ascetics of India and Christendom. While turn-of-the-century Egyptology has fallen out of favor with true comedics with a greater academic understanding of ancient Egypt, she makes a sound point worthy of reflection for us today. This is a passage from Ancestral Grimoire, Create Your Personal Book of Shadows, Tarot, by Nancy Hendrickson. Chapter 2. Meet the Ancestors. Side note, this is for tarot cards and a way to bridge tarot reading and ancestor work. Court cards, the royals, live at the heart of the ancestral tarot practice, since we use them to identify ancestral personalities. Through these cards, we can get a glimpse of the face an ancestor is showing us. Courts 101. Before diving in deeper, let's deal with the basics. There are 4 court cards or royals for each of the 4 tarot suits of wands, cups, swords, and pentacles, meaning there are 16 in all. They are typically called page, knight, queen, and king. However, depending on the deck that you use, they may have other names or titles instead, such as princess, prince, queen, king, as in the Druidcraft Tarot. Child, explorer, guardian, elder, as in the Gaian Tarot. Historically, physical characteristics, gender, and age were assigned to the court cards. For example, the Queen of Cups was identified as a middle-aged woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. But in our world of gender fluidity, such designations are archaic. The King of Pentacles could easily be a female head of household. And when it comes to age, the traditional assignments just don't work. I've seen adults who act like children and children who act like adults. Haven't you? The following charts contain the least you need to know about the members of the courts, and will be sufficient for the purposes of this book. You'll come to know them better through your own interactions with them in the exercises to come. Each rank acts a certain way, and that way is defined by the element of the suit. Looking at the Page of Wands, you know that this ancestor went about his life with youthful enthusiasm. But if you add in the element, Wands/fire, you'll gain a secondary layer to help understand his personality. From the elements chart, you know that this page is full of fire energy, passion perhaps lacking in patience. He has enthusiasm about whatever he's doing. For me it says this person, while incarnate, got in trouble more than once due to impulsivity. The Page of Swords, however, would have taken a thoughtful approach to new experiences. The shadow side of the royals. Court cards can also show you a side of an ancestor that perhaps you didn't expect. Here's the deal, a reversed royal shows the shadow side of their personality. One of my aunts was the Queen of Swords, honest and straightforward, but when reversed, her shadow side could be cold and distant. Just as we show 2 sides to the world of our inner self and outer mask, we also can be the reverse of both. Let me give you another example. Imagine that you wear the outer mask of the Queen of Swords and the inner self of the Queen of Cups. What are they reversed? Well, the Queen of Swords, as you just saw, can be cold and cutting, while the Queen of Cups can be guilt-ridden and so empathetic that she sacrifices her own well-being. Further in the book, as you work with the ancestors, you'll be uncovering several facets of a single ancestor, and this will help you understand how they manage to maintain their magical self out in the big, bad world. Although I'm going to go through each of the court cards, here's a handy cheat sheet. I want to emphasize, though, that the more you work with the ancestors, the more keywords you can fill in. And all this goes in your grimoire. Let's talk a little more about the shadow side. What, exactly, does that mean? A shadow side is an underexpressed part of who you are. It could be a trait that you don't like or one that you don't want to show the world. It's the one that would embarrass you if anyone knew about it. The shadow side is the one you keep hidden. If you draw an ancestral, possible that what he wants most in life is to be loved and admired. So what's his shadow side? He doesn't have good boundaries because if he says no, it's possible someone won't love him anymore. Does that make sense? If you're struggling with boundaries, it wouldn't be surprising if the reversed King of Cups showed up. Or what about a reversed page, regardless of suit? How would you interpret an adult who appears as a page? It's possible that they approached life in a childish way, or, when they were angry, they acted out. Think about the best and worst traits of a child and you'll have some idea about adults who appear as upright or reversed pages. But that's enough of examples. Let's go through all 16 of the court cards in more detail. As you read along, try to imagine someone you know, whether family, friends, or co-workers, that fits the description. Once you have a real person in your mind, it's going to be simple for you to interpret the courts. Meet the royals. Just for ease of reading, I'll use the pronouns that fit the cards, but in Chapter 5 I'll show you an effortless way to discover gender along with a few other useful tricks. The kings. The kings are the masters of their suits. They've learned the lessons of youth, have made mistakes, and learned hard lessons. The kings seen in a tarot deck like the Rider-Waite-Smith are from an era when a king had to be a warrior. You may or may not remember that Richard III lost his kingdom when he was killed on the battlefield. So much for hereditary kingships. King of Wands. This is the Fire King, associated with the astrological sign of Leo. He is also associated with spring, the time of year when seedlings pop up through the snow and trees begin to relief. Spring is dynamic, just like the King of Wands. The ancestral realm. Ancient myths and legends paint various pictures of an afterlife. Some envision heaven worlds, underworlds, great banquet halls, and so on. These depictions are subscriptions to religious beliefs that provide a specific notion regarding what happens following the physical death of an individual. One less built upon that view is that when a person dies she or he enters into the ancestral realm at one point. This is a dimension that maintains the individual's consciousness with a collective. To try and understand this, it helps to accept that the personality in each life is released by the soul. What enters the ancestral realm is the persona that was worn and enlivened by the soul. The soul is you, the persona is the role you played in material life. An associated metaphysical perspective is that when different nationalities interbreed, the offspring are connected by an interlacing field. In this light there can be various lineage attachments within the ancestral realm. For example, a person who is part German, Scottish, and Italian is connected with those lineages through a type of morphogenetic field that networks with others in morphic resonance. We should note that the ancestral realm is not actually a place per se, it is a state of being symbolized by the concept of the ancestral spirit. In metaphysical philosophy there are 7 planes that comprise universal existence. These are envisioned as ultimate, divine, spiritual, mental, astral, elemental, and material. The material plane is where energy is so dense and concentrated that things appear and act as solid objects. This state of existence binds energy fields to it much like a planet holds its atmosphere. In this light we can say that the ancestral spirit is bound to the land or to the spirit of the land. This gives stronger meaning to the idea of ancestral lands. In effect, the ancestral spirit is indeed connected with the spirit of the land, and dwells in between the organic memory of the earth and the elemental plane. More details can be found in the chapter on death and rebirth. In previous writings I have discussed the idea of the organic memory of the earth. The concept is rooted in the fact that all living beings go into the soil following material death. There they decompose and become absorbed beneath the land, the exception being body preservation. The metaphysical principle is that this forms a reservoir of their experiences, the memories of all that had been. This zone is sometimes called shadow. We can liken this to the idea in Eastern mysticism of the Akashic records, which is a concept that all memories are held in the bound energy field of the earth. Perhaps we are looking at spiritual and organic counterparts. In my personal work with the ancestral spirit, I find it most effective to connect inward. I can feel my ancestors within my body, and my body is linked to the spirit of the land. My ancestors seem to speak loudest at sacred sites, cemeteries, and in that state of being between dreaming and awakening. I sense the ancestors outside of me as well as inside. Over time I entered into an agreement of consciousness with my ancestors, from which arose the vision of the ancestral realm as a beehive. I like this imagery, for it is not unlike the ancient burial mounds of our ancestors, in which a single hole opened into the interior. Archaeologists and some anthropologists believe this was designed as a type of doorway through which the soul could exit and enter the mound, and by extension the hidden realm within it. Similarities exist in the lore connected to openings into a fairy mound. Regarding the theme of a hole as the entrance and exit to the ancestral realm, we find a connection to serpent symbolism. Snakes disappear into burrows, which connects them to themes of the underworld. They also shed their skins, a trait that links them to reincarnation. It is interesting to note that our DNA has a serpent-like appearance in its double helix formation. Many cultures that practice ancestral veneration include serpent symbolism of one type or another. In ancient Rome we find the 𝑙𝑎𝑟 spirit, which represents the guardian spirit of the surviving family lineage. Ancient Roman households featured a portrait of the head of the family, as genii or begetter, flanked on each side by 𝑙𝑎𝑟. Beneath the images a serpent represented the ancestral spirit depicted as moving along the foundation. All of this symbolism expressed the importance of preserving lineage. Further information about the 𝑙𝑎𝑟 spirit is found in Appendix 2. In ancient imagery the serpent is a symbol of health, as in the caduceus, and also a protector and preserver. The latter is found in the old practice of placing a snake in the grain storage bins to help prevent the supplies from being consumed by rodents. This promotes the idea of the snake being the protector and preserver of seeds, which is symbolic of aiding the ancestral lineage. Mythological snakes are sometimes associated with trees of which they are guardians. This theme was later changed to depict the snake as an evil character, as reflected in the myth of Adam and Eve in Old Hebrew culture. As mentioned in Chapter 2, ancient lore indicates a belief that humans are born from trees, and a belief that souls await rebirth in trees. It is interesting to note that the hollow of a tree was believed to be an entrance to the fairy realm. Some commentators have linked the fairy realm with the land of the dead. This is based upon the idea of old Neolithic burial mounds and their later connection to the lore of fairy mounds through which fairies and their world can be encountered. Ancient Greek philosophers such as Plutarch wrote that the souls of the dead reside on or in the moon. One mystical thought is that the moon collects the souls of the dead each night as it crosses over the world of mortal kind. The light of these souls is gathered in by the moon, and its brightness expands until it is full of souls. As souls are released back into mortal bodies, the light of the moon decreases until it can no longer be seen in the night sky. We can think of the moon as symbolizing the survival of the soul. The sun, a symbol of daily life, diminishes and dies as it sets. The moon represents the survival of that worldly light, the soul, into the next phase, the night. This metaphor speaks to the mystical concept of this world and the other world. The living walk in sunlight, and the dead walk in moonlight. Scholar Jules Cashford, in her book The Moon, Myth and Image, writes that the moon has long been regarded as a portal or doorway to another realm. She goes on to refer to the moon as the door to the eternal world. Cashford remarks that the moon is beyond the phenomena of time and change, which are connected to the earthly realm. Within the realm of the moon, souls are received and regenerated. Some ancient writers refer to a mystical as an island of the dead that lies in a vast sea. This island is the moon and the sea is the vast night sky. In tales of this nature, souls are depicted as journeying by boat to the island. This is reminiscent of the Greek myths in which the dead must give the ferryman a coin for passage. In this idea we can see a symbolic depiction of the soul relinquishing its material form, represented by the coin, so that it can move on to a non-material realm. In a spiritual sense, the moon can be a symbol for us of the ancestral realm or the light of the ancestral spirit itself. The changing and ever-returning display of its cycle speaks to us from another realm of the great mysteries of birth, life, death, and renewal. The ancestral wisdom shines down upon us from the night sky. It is enlightenment in the places of darkness. We are guided and companioned by all who have gone before us. That covenant shines brightly in the night sky. The Power of the Bloodline: A Woman's Mystery by Ksenia Menshikova. This is a summary of the book. In this work, Menshikova delves into the notion that the female line bloodline is a potent, often overlooked reservoir of ancestral energy, wisdom, and potential. She presents the bloodline not merely as a biological inheritance but as a living channel of forces, egregores, family currents, karmic patterns, and latent gifts. Through a mix of historical references, mystical theory, and practical instructions, she invites readers, especially women, to reclaim what has been lost or suppressed in their lineages. She explores how to identify inherited patterns, both empowering and limiting, how to work consciously with them, and how to activate the hidden power that lies within one's ancestry. While rich in promise and bold in its scope, the book notably leans toward a confident, directive tone. It presumes the reader's willingness to engage deeply with familial and energetic heritage, and offers strong claims about transformation via ancestral access. Some readers may find the framing of bloodline power a bit sweeping or in need of clearer grounding in personal context, for example, what counts as lineage, how to respectfully disengage from harmful legacies. Nonetheless, for those drawn to ancestral witchcraft, lineage work, or reclaiming feminine-rooted magical traditions, this book offers a potent resource for spiritual exploration and practical empowerment. A passage from the book. Title: The Structure of the Bloodline. Each bloodline does not exist by itself, but according to clear and immutable laws. Like any egregorial structure, a bloodline is a generation of collective mind. But its strength is not only in the common goals and interests of all members of the bloodline, but also in the fact that it is built on blood, the strongest energetic and magical substance of this world. Governments may be created and destroyed, any ideas and structures may arise and perish, old religions and gods may cease to exist, but the bloodline has always been and will always be. Everything may end in this world, but as long as man lives, his bloodline lives with him. All members of the bloodline and family work and live for one important goal: to strengthen and protect their bloodline. The more blood relatives and kinsmen it includes, the stronger it is. But the power is spread unevenly within the bloodline. The structure of the bloodline is such that everyone has to fulfill his own important function, and this function depends on the place in the hierarchy of the bloodline that a member of the family occupies. The resources are distributed according to one's place in the hierarchy: strength, knowledge, health, talent, the quality that is stored in your bloodline. The bloodline, like any other egregore, consists of the following elements. These are just the titles. You will have to purchase the book to learn its meaning and more about how to work with your own bloodline. Here they are: 1. The core of the bloodline. 2. The body of the bloodline. 3. The living space of the bloodline. 4. The dead space of the bloodline. Which position are you in? Check out the picture and ponder on it, my dear Stardust. Where to honor the ancestors. All this talk about burial mounds, or ancestral shrines, does not mean that these are the only places where we might encounter ancestors. Only a small proportion of places have prehistoric burial mounds. But almost all have churchyards and cemeteries. Add to them war memorials, roadside shrines to traffic accident victims, and so forth. Once you start to take note of places where the dead are buried or commemorated, then the landscape of every village, town and city starts to take on a new level of significance. Simply being aware that the dead are, in many places, never far away is an excellent start. This is a step or two short of honoring them, but at least you are not totally ignoring them. As you go about your everyday business, learn to be aware of the presence of the dead in graveyards and on memorials. A long-distance journey not made by motorways and dual carriageways will take you through many towns and villages, with the cemeteries on the edge of the settlement, at least when the cemetery was created, and the parish church near the historic center. Just be aware, no more. When walking, I suggest you briefly pause to acknowledge the inhabitants of burial grounds and those commemorated on memorials. When the need arises to walk into a churchyard or such like, then pause at the gate. If, as is often the case, I am carrying a walking stick or staff, then I tap it 3 times on the ground. Otherwise, just tapping my right foot is sufficient. Whatever you chose to do, make sure it's not unduly conspicuous and simply get into the habit of always doing it. No need for formal prayers or anything elaborate, just spare a thought for those who have gone before you. I live next to the parish churchyard, so have reason to pass through on my way to or from a variety of prosaic places on the far side. But most people only enter a cemetery for funerals or to place floral tributes on the graves of relatives or close friends. I will not presume to suggest what you should, or should not, do regarding honoring the graves of people you know, as I am sure just doing what comes naturally is exactly right for you. But as you walk about, mentally acknowledge the other people sharing that place. You may not know who they were, but nevertheless they were just as much people as the ones you did know in life. Until 5 years ago I had never lived within about 50 miles of the churchyard near to my current home. So the names on the gravestones are not of friends, but of strangers. In a few cases I know surviving relatives, if only because we chat as they tend the grave, but I can neither put faces to any of the deceased nor tell you anything significant about their lives. While many readers may share this same deep sense of not being a native, it is largely a modern phenomenon. Only a couple of generations or so ago most people would have been acquainted with everyone buried in a village churchyard within their lifetime, and would have a fairly good idea about how the previous generation was related to them. Such a detailed social history is now exceptionally rare even within rural communities. One other change is that churchyards contain not only graves but also memorial stones marking where ashes have been deposited after cremation. However, many people's ashes do not have any markers, but have been placed, sometimes surreptitiously, sometimes not, at places which the person thought of fondly when alive. Only surviving family members know of these places, so it is important that they are honored. Because there is no collective term that covers both inhumations and cremations, in the next few sections I will simply refer to graves and burials to avoid cumbersome sentences. But please read these as all-encompassing words rather than merely literal.
From snow owl crystals to you, my dear viewers, as we close this sacred night, I want to take a moment to thank our ancestors, the ones who walked before us, who carried our stories, and whose whispers still guide us through the veil. May their memory be honored and their wisdom remembered. I hope you enjoyed this book recommendation list and that it inspires you on your own journey of ancestral connection and spiritual growth. Until next time, may your path be blessed and your ancestors walk beside you always. Happy Halloween!